Hello, creative people! Today I'll be playing around with 8 different watercolor techniques. Let's start off by gathering the materials we'll be using. First off, I need a hard flat surface to secure my watercolor paper to. For paper, I'll be using pages from a Canson XL watercolor pad. I of course will be needing my watercolor palette, which will be the star of today's video. Brushes can often be expensive, but these ran for only $1 or so, and do the trick perfectly, so thank you, Dollarama. Water is also an essential tool in the creation of today's paintings, as it will be the activator for the pigment in the palette. I will set aside a ruler and tape to achieve sharp edges and to hold my work steady as I create. Drawing media, such as pens and pencils, will also come in handy. One of the techniques I'll be trying includes the use of oil pastel, so I'll have that ready for myself close by. 2 different techniques also use table salt and cotton swabs. That concludes what I'll be using for the creation of today's watercolor techniques. I hope this video inspires you to try them out for yourself. If you do, please share and tag Yulia and me on Facebook or Instagram. Let's begin! I'm going to start by dividing up my page into 4 equal quadrants, by taking my 12cm ruler and marking it at the 6cm line, horizontally. Then repeating this vertically on the page, marking halfway at the 4.5cm line. Scratch off involves scratching the paper to create small indents. Start by scratching or dragging onto your page. For this, I used a white-tipped pen to engrave a message. Then wash over the page with your watercolor to reveal the engravement. The paint will fill the punctured surface and appear darker and more defined than the rest of your wash. The next technique is called wet on wet. This approach showcases the best quality of watercolor, its ability to create beautiful movement. To produce this technique, wet your paper with your brush. Then as it's still damp, dip your brush into a color and lightly dot onto the wet area and watch as the pigment feathers. A gradient can be difficult, but the results are very rewarding. The advantage is that you have the highest control over the result as you gradually decrease or increase the color intensity. The trick is to keep your page damp and brush in a smooth motion to create the subtle transition. Lastly, I'll be using the lifting technique. This is where you paint, then use another means to remove or move around the paint. In my case, I'm using a cotton swab. This will result in the paint lifting off my page as well as maneuvering the paint. The same thing can be done with a paper towel or tissue. There are many uses for this technique. It can be used to correct mistakes, develop textures, create highlights, or value changes. The first technique I'll be creating is called an oil pastel resist. The oil from the pastel and water from the watercolor don't mix, so the markings will stay visible, which creates a two-tone texture effect. Next is the dry brush technique. This is where you don't add any water on your brush and directly use the pigmented color, which creates a range of broken edges, implying neither hard or soft edges. It adds more of a variety of brushstrokes to a painting. Splattering is a simple and fun technique. It involves spraying paint onto the paper. The further away it is from the paper, the wider the area is covered. It is used to create interesting textural effects. The next way I'll be playing with watercolor is with the use of common table salt. As the wash of the watercolor dries, the salt absorbs the pigment gradually. The larger the salt crystal, the more noticeable. In my example, it is very subtle, but still achieves a visually appealing effect with the watercolor. One of my favorite parts once completing a piece is peeling off the tape. It just leaves behind such crisp, satisfying lines. The following are some extra examples of me using these techniques, with some differing styles and colors. Here are my finished products of 8 different watercolor techniques. I hope today's video has inspired you to try them out for yourself and find even more ways to play around with watercolor media. Please feel free to share your creations with Yulia and I via Instagram and Facebook. Enjoy the rest of your day, and remember to get creative.